The historicity of the Book of Exodus. One of the greatest debates in the field of biblical archaeology is the historicity of the Book of Exodus. Just like the pharaohs in the Book of Genesis, the two pharaohs in the Book of Exodus are not identified by name. However, there is information within the text that can help shed light on the historical background of the Exodus. There is evidence in the form of tomb illustrations, Egyptian records on papyrus scrolls, and pieces of Egyptian literature that support the events recorded in the Book of Exodus as possible. Slaves and migrants of Semitic origin were present in Egypt during the 2nd millennium BC, and mud bricks were the standard building material in the cities of the Nile Delta. Several Egyptian texts, such as the Amaditions of Ipuwer and the Louvre leather scroll, also have parallels to passages in the Book of Exodus. However, there is no direct evidence of the enslavement and liberation of Israelites in Egypt. While there are some who theorize that the Exodus could have occurred, historians such as Thomas Thompson and Robert Cootie have concluded that the Exodus did not occur. When it comes to dating the Exodus, the two predominant theories are a 15th century BC Exodus and a 13th century BC Exodus. According to the 15th century BC Exodus theory, the events of the Book of Exodus occurred during the reigns of Thutmose III and Amenhotep II. The 13th century BC Exodus theory, in contrast, places the events in the Book of Exodus during the reigns of Ramesses II and Merneptah. Supporters of both theories of dating present evidence to support their claims, but there are some historians such as Abraham Malamat who suggest that the Exodus occurred over hundreds of years and can't be given a specific date. The ancient Jewish historian Josephus also shared his opinion on this subject and speculated that the exodus of the Hebrews correlated with the expulsion of the Hyksos under Pharaoh Amenhotep I. The route of the Exodus, the exact path taken by the Israelites out of Egypt and into Canaan, is also widely debated. One location of the route that is difficult to locate is Yam Suf. While it has been mistakenly translated as Red Sea, which is a body of salt water that is between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the Hebrew term actually means Sea of Reeds, a term that most likely identifies the location as a lake. Places that have been proposed as Yam Suf include Lake Bardwell, Lake Menzalel, Lake Timsah, the Bitter Lakes, the Gulf of Inlat, and the Gulf of Suez. Another location on the route that is difficult to locate is Mount Sinai. While the traditional Mount Sinai in the southern Sinai Peninsula has been widely believed to be the Mount Sinai from the Book of Exodus, scholars have suggested alternative locations to be the true Mount Sinai. One of these alternative locations is Jubel el-Lawaz, a mountain in northwest Saudi Arabia. There is evidence that supports the claim that Egyptians during the New Kingdom period had contact with Semitic peoples and even owned Semitic slaves. Sources that support this claim include the illustrations of a 15th century BC tomb in Thebes that depicts Semitic slaves making mud bricks and a section of the Instructions of Merikare, dated to circa 2040 BC, that records the presence of Semitic slaves working in the eastern Nile Delta. However, there is no evidence that identifies any of these Semitic slaves as being Israelites, but it gives credence to the possibility of the enslavement of Israelites in ancient Egypt. It is agreed that the Hebrew Bible was composed long after the dates were reported by various authors. The Book of Exodus is composed of a combination of J-text, E-text, and P-text. This means that parts of the Book of Exodus were written during the 10th century BC and the 6th century BC. However, a hymn in the Book of Exodus called the Song of the Sea was originally a part of the Hebrew oral tradition that was composed between 1125 and 1000 BC. This hymn indicates that the Book of Exodus has origins that predate the conversion of the story from oral tradition into written literature. there is also examples of Egyptian literature and historical records that have parallels to the Book of Exodus. As previously stated, there are Egyptian texts that prove the presence of Semitic slaves in the Nile Delta. One text, the Laudations of Ippawar, describes various disasters that affected Egypt in the past and how the Egyptians defended their borders from Asiatics. There is also another text called Papyrus Anastasius V that contains a report from an Egyptian officer who tried to capture 2 runaway slaves on the eastern frontier. While these documents do sound like events in the Book of Exodus, they are not direct evidence of the Exodus. However, there is one Egyptian record called the Menurta Stela that proves that a group of people called Israel did exist in 1207 BC. To summarize, there is scant amount of indirect archaeological evidence that indicates that the Exodus may be based on a grain of truth. However, there is no direct archaeological evidence or any Egyptian account that points to the biblical account of the Exodus as a major historical event.